You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
This is Andy. That's Matt.
I'm Matt. You're Andy.
There we go.
We never know how you're going to do this.
We got it all cleared up for our loyal listeners who were probably confused at the start of this.
I bet they think our voices sound exactly the same.
I'm sure they do.
Have you listened to a show where the voices are the same?
Anymore.
You don't listen to shows. You just
I'm
watch.
pretty sure they can tell who's
Andy,
who.
That's a great impression of Jasmine.
Well, that's my echo voice. I'm like a ventriloquist. I'm not good.
I wouldn't be surprised.
People have heard my British accent. Now they're hearing my Jasmine accent.
They've heard a lot of your accents on the show.
My grandmother's voice.
Yes, Jasmine's grandmother's
My mom's voice.
Yeah.
Jasmine's grandma. We should all have him come in here for an intervention with Andy.
Wow.
A reckoning.
I haven't done our producer yet.
No.
Hey, I'm Blake. Hey, guys. Are your mics okay? Can you do a mic check for me? You sound great. You sound great. Great job.
I wouldn't mess with the wizard, you know.
He's going to throw songs in. No, thank you, Blake. Not today, Blake. Not today. I am excited today, though, because across America, we have about 260 to 270 what we can refer to as footwear factories. That's
right.
Either big facilities making shoes, and actual what you think of factories.
Yep.
Or folks who are just making shoes. And I talked to one guy several years ago who just makes shoes in the back of his house.
Nice.
Yeah. And I've seen, we've done a project where we've actually tracked different production around the country. And one of them was in Texas, and they still had it was on a single road in the middle of nowhere.
Uh-huh.
And it looked like something from the 1800s, but it still had the horse where you tie the horse off at.
Cool, yeah.
So that was out front. So there's a diversity of made in America, all types of different products that are made here. A lot mold injection, but there's kind of a made in America kind of fashion trend that's kind of reemerging in some of our urban areas.
Yeah,
and so,
definitely.
One of those is one of FDRA's newest members.
Yeah. Lee and Barrett, man. So before I introduce our guest, one of the things I had the opportunity to do was be a part of the Sneaker Essentials program at FIT in New York. And I got an email from Brandon Cohn, who's our guest, who's CEO of Lee and Barrett. And Brandon, in the email, you stated, hey, we were on this program. Let's talk. Because Brandon was also on Sneaker Essentials as the program was looking at domestic production in particular. And he said, my company makes footwear in New York City. And that was like, yeah, exactly. So I was like, we definitely have a talk.
Yeah.
So Brandon and I connected. We had a great conversation. I kept thinking to myself as I was listening to your story, we've got to capture this on Shoe In because it's a really important part of kind of the renewal of some of the domestic production we're seeing here in the U.S. and then the launch of brand new ideas and brands in places you wouldn't think of. So Brandon, first and foremost, thanks a ton for being on Shoe In, and more importantly, thanks a ton for reaching out. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm really glad to be on.
Yeah, so let's jump right in it, Brandon. What's your shoe story? Tell us about Lee and Barrett, your background, what you guys are doing, what types of shoes you're making, where you're making them. Lay it all on us. We're very interested to learn more.
Yeah, so I think just stepping back, a lot of time when we have this conversation, we seem to lead first with "we're made in America," and that's kind of a statement that gets thrown out there a lot. I think when I first started this company, the more important question, the more important point that we were trying to make was, what does America stand for, or what should America stand for?
Right.
And really the reason for this company originating is that we have this ambition to lead America towards having a more productive dialogue about what Americanism means. So I don't know about you, but I wake up every morning, I watch the news, and without making a political statement left, right, or center, I just see the conversation that Americans are having and how divisive it is. And again, not to make a political statement, but to make a social and cultural statement about what this country means and what it should stand for. And the way we're kind of doing this, the way we're making this statement is through our footwear. So, of course, to do this in an authentic way, we make our footwear in America, New
Right.
York City specifically. Design-wise, we try to draw globally, kind of that melting pot philosophy. And our team is just a really diverse, passionate group of people that come from a lot of different areas, and we're all trying to make great shoes. And that's kind of, the origin of our company and where we're coming from.
Yeah, that's a very unique take than I've heard other Made in America brands take. And what do I mean by that? I mean, a lot of folks, rightfully so, wrap themselves in the flag. There's a heritage there. There's a cowboy image. There is a construction worker image. There's some kind of soul of the earth Americanism that definitely speaks to millions of people in our country and is well received. But when you go to the lee-barrett.com and you start to go through your website and you see the products, it speaks more to that Americanism that is kind of apolitical, that I think really brings on, just looking at the styles. They are styles that are unique. They have materials that are unique. They're very fashionable. So, they're not work boots, construction boots. They're not cowboy boots. Some of the things you think of when it comes to Americana. And so you're kind of tapping into a 21st century Americana, which is, I think, a different take than other shoe companies have done. Am I tracking with you? Is that kind of how you view it?
Yeah, 100%. And interestingly enough, I think an example we like to give is we kind of comparing it to food. So when you think of American food, maybe you think of burgers and fries.
Yeah.
But when you think of new American food, maybe you're thinking of something a little bit more elevated, a little bit more premium. And I think in the same way, you can kind of view American fashion that way. Maybe American fashion has this one type of aesthetic, but when you start to think of new American fashion, new American style, you're really looking at something more elevated. And then there kind of becomes that issue of why don't we see more of that?
Right.
And what we're saying is you don't see more of it is because we're not making this stuff here.
Right.
How can you have a new American style when you're outsourcing it?
Yeah.
So by aligning ourselves behind this style, behind these values, and making our product here, I hope that we're really hitting on that aesthetic and something a lot of people are looking for.
Yeah, I think you are.
Why we're seeing. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at your website. I'm looking at the Jeffrey. Of course, I'm the men's side, and looking at the Jeffrey shoe. And so it's a shoe that's got a suede lining that's really fashionable, that's unique. It's got a silhouette that's muted in a way, but when you look at the naming, like Jeffrey, and we deal with so many companies, so many brands, so many lines who have to, it's kind of like kind of naming the streets in your neighborhood. You get to a point where you think the builder was just throwing their kids' names up there. But for this, you're like, where do you draw Jeffrey from? Well, Michael Jeffrey Jordan, kind of a 21st century American icon. And you have a quote there. And so there's things like that. They're tapping into things that would speak to me as someone born in the late 70s, and then even beyond. And so it's kind of a really cool vibe that you're going on. And I think that's totally different than what we've seen in the past from other brands.
Yeah, thanks. I think something I'd also maybe like to draw your attention to is we've got this really cool style that just got posted called the Raven. And our designer, Josh Daniel and Lou Zhu, designed it for us recently, and it was in collaboration with Robert Ravencraft, who's a runner on Miami Beach.
Uh-huh.
He's run 8 miles a day, every day for the last, I think, over 43 years
Oh,
now.
my gosh.
Yeah. And so something we're also really trying to do is align our brand behind Americans that we value, that are sort of exuding this American tenacity, this work ethic. And I think that's also a really important part of where we're coming from. In terms of like the naming convention on our site, what we do is we take a famous American or an American that we look up to, and their middle name is the name of the shoe.
Gotcha.
So Robert Ravencraft, we call it the Raven, and that's kind of what our naming convention is. And the reason why we did that is, at least in American culture, middle names have kind of this very powerful place for us. It's an opportunity for our families to kind of harken back to a loved one, or like to honor someone that came before that was important to you. So I'm hoping that kind of through our site, we're sort of developing this culture, like this Americanism, that we're striving for.
It's funny you mention that because there's several of us who work in the FDRA offices. Interestingly enough, on the men's side, we all go by our middle names. So my middle name's Matthew. Andy's is Andrew. Yeah, so it's like
our producer as well. Actually,
yeah. So it's
middle name.
It's a weird trend. Anyway, I digress, but.
My middle name is Lee, and my brother's middle name is Barrett.
There you go.
Oh, there you go. Secrets. They're all coming out.
Scratch off that question where you got the name from. I think a lot of people are interested in what kind of studio space or what kind of facility you guys are situated in New York. Maybe you can tell us a bit about how big the space is. What kind of machines you guys are using, and then also who have you hired? Who are helping make these shoes, from the design team to kind of the commercializing team, the people actually running the machines? Because, as we said previously, there's not a lot of skilled talent and artisan talent still in America. So maybe take us through the process of how you guys have hired up and who are working with you guys.
Yeah, so we have a design studio in Midtown Manhattan. We have another design studio in Brooklyn that's smaller, and then we have two facilities in Long Island City. Basically, the way we do it is we function as a quickly growing startup. So, for instance, Josh Daniel, our creative director, comes right out of FIT. We have an industrial designer named Lucia Zhu coming right out of Pratt. And we have some skilled workers who have lived in the area for decades that are on board as well. And what we're doing is the way we're developing these styles is in a very handcrafted sort of a way. We wanted to be able to produce quickly, but keep that handcraft feel, because I think that's a really important kind of value add that we're offering. And I think something we've also been really mindful of is not just making one-off shoes. So I think a lot of times American-made product gets this kind of bad rap where it's very expensive because it's just one person making this one product for hours and hours. And we kind of wanted to buck that trend. A good example of that is we just partnered with Vibram USA up in Boston.
Yeah, great company.
And they're fantastic. We're outsoling all of our footwear with them now. And we have a launch going into their store in May up on Newbury Street. So basically being able to take, these workers that have been in the industry for decades now, couple it with kind of the entrepreneurial enthusiasm of our design team coming right out of school. And what we really have is kind of this melting pot of a team. And again, I'm hoping it really kind of reflects that American attitude that we're going for. In terms of equipment, not to bore you guys, it's basic equipment, to be honest. A lot of it's really coming from that handcrafted skill, though.
Right.
That's really where you're getting the aesthetic, the leather foxing along the bottom, just really the detailed quality of each piece is coming from that skilled handcrafted labor.
Yeah, you mentioned you guys are working with Vibram, kind of do some product launches with them. Or are you like particularly right now focused a lot on internet sales? Or are you looking for other channels to open up to? What do you see as your strategy for getting your shoes out?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think a lot of times when people talk about scaling a business, it kind of comes down to marketing and PR, and these are the two discussions that you have. But really, way before this happens, it's brand strategy. It's what is your company? What do you stand for? Why do you deserve to exist? Do you have a reason for being? And I think more than, how our percentage of online sales or percentage of wholesale business or what have you, what we're really trying to do is make sure that we're developing a product that we believe in, with a team that we stand behind, with partners that we want to associate ourselves with. That's why I brought up the example of working with Robert Raven Craft out of Florida, working with Bob. We're even doing a partnership. I'm not sure if you guys are drummers, but with Steve Gadd, a very big drummer. So just anyone we can kind of align ourselves with that represents the values that we have, that's how we're growing. And then from there, it's really word of mouth, and it's shocking how many people wind up reaching out to us, asking us about our story, wanting to be involved with what we're doing, interested in the product. And yeah, that's really kind of a more organic approach, rather than us just kind of throwing ad dollars around.
There's an authenticity to that, Brandon. I think that's why people gravitate towards it. Now, you mentioned something about us being bored about talking about machinery, but we actually eat that. We eat that stuff up. We've been in many shoe factories. Not bored at all. We've been in many shoe factories all over the world. And my question for you is kind of a technical question in the sense of how are you managing the supply chain, the access to raw materials? There's what you hear here in the U.S. is that, the tanneries, most of them have moved out. It's difficult to find materials. Andy touched on, you talked about it's difficult to find skilled labor. How do you kind of approach that? If you are to scale this up and hit it super, really big, how will you kind of approach managing that whole aspect of the business?
Yeah, I think it comes down to making sure your product line is able to align with rapid production.
Right.
So we make sure that we're able to actually make our shoes quickly in a scalable way so that it's also cost efficient for us. So we're slip lasting everything.
Gotcha.
We're not using cup soles, we're foxing. And we do that for two reasons. One, it makes for a lighter shoe, a more comfortable shoe, more handcrafted feel to the shoe. And we also don't have to stock a million cup soles, value. I mean, you guys know better than anyone, like thousands of units for each size range, and stocking it and holding inventory. And kind of our concept is, at the extreme sense, is I want no inventory. I want no excess goods. I don't want any of that. I want to be able to make to order. I think it brings up another really important point is that when you're making product domestically, you can react so quickly. So like other companies might have to do 1,000 unit run and ship it in, because we're slip lasting and foxing our stuff in the city, we can just make it to order and then pivot as seasons change. Maybe a good example is that for a lot of people, next season is already on a vessel coming in. For us, we're still figuring out exactly what the right materials are going to be for next season.
Yeah.
We're designing continuously, and then at that last moment, we can say, okay, here's the type of material we really do want to run with. This is the reaction we're getting. This is what customers are asking for.
That's really cool. I mean, it's sustainable. It's way more sustainable. It takes out the risk. We can't tell you how many conversations we've had with people about managing inventory. It's a huge art, not a science. It's a huge problem in the industry on how to manage inventory. We saw, even if you look at our import numbers back after the Great Recession, everyone got really happy and kind of hoping that it was a year blip. And in 2010, we imported in a ton of product and it just sat there. Yeah. Or if you're dealing with the port crisis and your inventory just sitting there. So it's the number one liability, right, for a lot of our brands. And if you're able to manage that in a scalable way, that's there. You're gonna be very successful in kind of this new environment we find ourselves in.
Yeah, and I always find it sort of amazing. Like the goal of any business, at least in some sense, is to please the customer, and it's sort of amazing the acrobatics some businesses have to go through in order to provide a product that they hope the customer is going to want.
Right.
And what more simple way of doing that than just making the product as the customer wants it, where they buy it.
Right.
And it's sort of an extreme thought in today's world because so much is sourced and so much is outsourced, and and logistics is so complicated. But again, like what better way to please the customer than just to make a product that they want when they want it near where they live.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and how do you extend that model out? Let's walk that through. So it doesn't sound like you're aiming to get into what we would think of as a traditional production, even here in the U.S., you don't want to have a big facility that, that has 500 people making shoes all day long would you extend this out kind of in a regional way? How do you, if this goes big, I mean, how do you view the future?
It's a great point. Actually, the original, before the brand even started, the original concept was, in my head anyway, you see how devastated retail is right now. Just how difficult it is for everyone. Stores are closing left and right. This is not new. How do you help these retailers? And kind of my thought was, well, what if you could make what I was calling in my head boutique manufacturing facilities? And what if you planted these boutique manufacturing facilities adjacent to the distribution centers of these big retailers?
Right.
And that way, instead of them having to go on these month-long development timelines, time and actions overseas, custom it, all the rest of it. What if you could just produce the goods right next to their DC, ship it over to them, and their customer could have it, a week from now or 2 days from now,
right.
The way Amazon works, right?
Yeah.
So that's how everyone's looking to function. And from there, it just kind of expanded out, whereas now I've got this concept for a brand. I really want to do the same thing. I want to manufacture it right next to my distribution center, and that's really how I want to build it. No overhead, or low overhead, low inventory.
Yeah.
There's a reason why companies don't like doing that. It's a nightmare.
Right.
It's an absolute nightmare if you're going to try to predict what people are going to want to buy at a future date, how much they're going to want to pay for it, the volume you're going to have to push, all while keeping overhead. It's a recipe for disaster. It's not going to work.
Yeah. That's true.
That's a great point. How I'm looking at your website, just like Matt is, and I'm looking through your different style offerings. How do you guys make decisions on what product you're going to put out there and start making? I'm sure you have a lot of talented designers, and I'm sure there's a process. But how do you guys make decisions? Typically, companies will line up a plethora of different types of shoe styles and products and go through it and talk about it and have their sales teams in. But kind of a more entrepreneurial startup like you guys, how do you guys talk about it? Are you going out and looking at what people are wearing in New York? Are you looking at what retail is selling? And then I guess how do you cultivate that research as to what is style right at the moment? And then how do you make decisions on which designs are going to actually go in production?
Yeah, I think it's another really important point. And to what you were saying earlier, typically there is this long development process. Lots of styles are put out, sales teams come in, what's selling, looking at data, what's trending. And it's also amazing, though, if you could just walk outside and ask people.
Right.
And I think we kind of make that a priority. And it's not that we are expecting people to know what they're going to want from a progressive shoe like what we're making. We're not asking the customer to design it for us.
Right.
But certainly the feedback is the most important thing any company could do, and it's something that we spend a lot of time doing. So typically we'll have our designers come in, we'll crank out a bunch of iterations of a style, and then we'll go out and we'll ask people, try these on, wear these for a week. What do you think of them? Do you like this? Don't you like this? And then what you're kind of having is this collaboration between, what we feel are the experts, our design team, and the actual consumer, what they're looking for, what they're seeing. Because, the consumer knows better than anyone else what's cool, what's in, what they're looking for. And I think a lot of times, again, these kind of acrobatics of having these long development cycles is really just a way of trying to work around not making your product domestically. If you're going to have to spend 8 weeks putting 10,000 units on a boat before it arrives here to then sell it, you better have a whole team on board working out the numbers and margins for things. Whereas if you're making the stuff here, I don't, whether my margin is X or a little bit less than that, it's irrelevant to me. My overhead is low. I've got no inventory. All I'm trying to do is make an authentic brand and make a product that people respond to and like. And it simplifies everything tremendously.
Yeah, and before we kick it over to Jasmine, who can talk to us more about our fashion sense and how we can improve, right, Jasmine?
I'll do my best.
Brandon, let me ask you as we wrap this up. You obviously have a lot of knowledge. You've been very articulate about your vision for Lee and Barrett and for what you're trying to accomplish and how the consumer is changing. I mean, a lot of what you're talking about in your vision on having these regional manufacturing centers next to DCs or distribution centers, it sounds a lot like what brands are struggling with globally on production. How they rather than doing China for U.S. or Vietnam for U.S., they want to do local for local, where you're producing shoes in China for Chinese consumers, but they're U.S. brands. And I think that's what we're seeing when we think about the speed factories and those who are propped up on the athletic side here. And so all that is, really relevant. What's your background? How did you even fall into this in a sense that you seem to be well versed in kind of the supply chain, and how did you kind of get involved in all this?
Yeah, so my great grandfather was Albert Weiss, And if you were in the costume jewelry business back in the day, he had one of the biggest companies there was. He was in Vogue. He kind of initiated that costume jewelry movement in the city.
Yeah.
His son, my grandfather, went into the business, and now I'm fourth generation in the industry. So I guess in a sense, it's kind of family is where the general knowledge of these things is coming from, because I've been in it. And then I think coupled with just the current state of the country, where we're at socially and culturally, just kind of combining maybe this technical understanding with this more brand focused understanding is sort of where Lee & Barrett kind of got its start from.
That's cool, man. What a great legacy to continue on.
Yeah.
It's really cool that you can bring that to us as consumers and to the industry, but also be true to your family's legacy in this space. So we're that is fashionable, I'll tell you that, folks. So with that, let's turn it over to Jasmine. Jasmine, for your world famous fashion, footwear, and focus segment, you are up.
So looking on the site, I see that there's like a lot of leather. And one thing that I've just noticed, just like as we're getting ready for spring and summertime, I've mentioned, the cowboy boots are popular. White combat boots have been popular. So it seems like all the materials that you would think would be more for fall are kind of going to be hot for the spring and summer. And even me personally, I was just thinking, like, I've bought 2 suede pair of shoes recently, and it's interesting that that's what I chose versus like a sandal or something open toe, but those are my most recent purchases. So I think the site kind of, even though I'm sure there will be new products on there, it kind of matches up with what I feel like is going to be most popular this season still. Like, I feel like the leathers will still be in for both men and women, especially with the things that I've chosen and things that I've seen my friends buy as well.
Well, I think not that I know anything about fashion, but I think like the fly knit trend is it's still booming and growing.
Right.
But I think some people are starting to turn away from that and go back to leather and say, I want something a little more artisan, a little bit higher end. I just want something different on my foot.
And I think people are still incorporating the fly knit, but only a little bit, not like the whole shoe like everybody was starting to do. But I definitely agree with you. I feel like that's starting to fizzle out a little bit. And it might come back during the winter when you think it should probably be here during the spring and summertime. So.
Well, to Brandon's point, he has a business model that can be more responsive to the fact that leather trends have continued on into non-traditional timing, whether because of winter, or because winter's been extended, or people are done with knit upper shoes, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Brandon, you can be more responsive to these kind of trends that may be a little bit different than what we are used to from a seasonal perspective.
Yeah, and I think you also hit on a good point where a lot of times when we're talking about seasonal transitions, we're talking about color palette changing, but a lot of times it also comes down to material. So being able to have that kind of flexibility on what material is working also has been really helpful for us. I think getting to, the point you're making about, leather being more in trend going into next season, just kind of the importance of having these elevated looks available for the customer.
Right.
Very cool. Very cool. Folks, you can Google, it's Lee & Barrett. You can also go to their website. It's www.lee-barrett.com. Check out all their styles. What's also really cool is there's a tab on there for studio where you can actually go in and actually look at the pictures of them making the shoe and their process.
That's really cool.
So when we talk, one of the key things is, for today's consumer is they want to look behind the curtain and know what they're doing, how they're doing it. Are they real? What's their brand story? And so, Brandon, congratulations on not only just creating this company and trying to do something really great in this space, but also peeling back the curtain and being very transparent about who you're hiring and how you're doing the whole process.
Thanks so much, guys, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon.
Of course. Folks, as always, this is Shoe and Show. We cover everything American made, American sold, flippers. We probably do cover that.
Shoes.
I meant flip-flops.
That's hilarious.
Slippers, flippers, sandal shoes, heels, sneakers, flats, loafers, flippers.
Mules.
I just get gong myself.
What about aqua socks? They make the cut?
Maybe.
Yeah, they have to.
Speaking of neon, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Folks, as always, you can reach us at shoeandshow.com. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We love to have feedback on our show. Tell us what you love. Tell us what we can do better. Tell us what topics you want to hear about. Tell us what guests you want to hear from. We want to cover every aspect of the industry because we feel like if we have these elevated conversations, we can make the whole industry better as a whole. We can understand what each of us are doing. We can understand a little bit more about how to better collaborate and unify as an industry. So, as always, to all our listeners, thank you for listening. And until next time, Shoe-In is out.
Shoe-In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.